And hello and welcome to Live at Epiphan. This is the show that happens every single Thursday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern. And on this show, we talk about live streaming and video technology and live production topics. So thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you here today. If you're new on the show, tell you a little bit about what this show is all about. It's an interactive show, so please put your questions in chat. You can also email us at live@epiphan.com with any questions or comments, and we love having your feedback and interacting and engaging with all of you. So please don't hesitate. If you have any questions throughout the show, pop them into chat and we'll be happy to answer them right away. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about using Skype, bringing in a guest on Skype during your live show, which is a very relevant topic. It's something that we see a lot of people trying to do, and we're going to kind of show you how we do it here in the Epiphan studio using Pearl 2, which is our all-in-one live production switcher and streaming device. So without further ado, why don't we go ahead and bring in our guest for today. So who do we have here on Skype? Oh, and hello, there he is, George Herbert.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, George, how are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm here in a secret location far, far away from you where we're doing this experiment with joining you by Skype.
Well, it's great to have you here today, George. And yeah, why don't we talk a little bit about how we have you here on Skype? So, maybe first of all, why don't we talk about why someone might want to do a side-by-side Skype call like what we're having here. I mean, we've been seeing on the news, this is nothing new. I see reporters coming in by satellite, various off-site locations, and engaging with a news anchor. That's kind of like what we're doing here today.
Yeah, it used to be very common, in the news to see now joining us by satellite and a guest coming in and joining. You probably have noticed that today it's more common to see someone joining by Skype. And there's a number of reasons for that. One, obviously, you don't have to send a satellite truck out to a location. Anyone can do it with a laptop to join by Skype. So it gives a lot of flexibility and a very small footprint at your remote site.
Excellent. And, I watch several live stream shows on various channels on YouTube and Facebook. And I've always been interested in shows where they bring in guests, because I find that when you bring in a guest, when you bring in someone else, it brings a whole new perspective, and it brings a whole new set of interesting subject matter. It creates discussion. Also, we see times where you might get two popular YouTubers, for example, who decide to do a collaboration, and it's like their channels merge as one for one moment, and that's also, something that we're starting to see. Have you seen similar?
Yeah, absolutely. And, cross promotion is a big reason to do it. If you're someone who's doing live streams, again, travel is expensive, but Skype is cheap to free, right? Depending on what sort of a setup you have. So, it's much easier to have someone join you. Although in a perfect world, having someone in person is always ideal. There's a lot more chemistry that can happen in person compared to doing something remotely. But, this is pretty close and is at least going to give you a very simple, straightforward, easy to use way of having people join, get that cross promotion out of it, hopefully grow your audience, both participants growing their audience. In this case, you and I share the same audience, so we're not necessarily growing anything there. But if we were bringing in someone else, if some of our viewers, they might remember from a very early show we did some time ago, we had Ski with Pete join us remotely to talk about his channel and some various different subjects. And that's something we did remotely with Skype. And so this is sort of talking about and breaking down exactly how that might work.
Now, as setting up for this show today, we had a few conversations about how to make this Skype call work and how to make it look and sound good and how to create the layout that you see around us here. So there's quite a bit going on, but really it wasn't all that complicated, was it?
No, it's the kind of thing that logically, when you look at it, it makes sense. It just looks really messy when you're drawing it on the back of the napkin. So it's once you sort of break it down into the simplicity of what you might need, most of it, I think, is pretty self-explanatory, I think, when you take an objective look at it.
Okay, so I'm sure the people are curious of how exactly it is we're doing this. So why don't we show a little diagram? So Lisa, why don't we go over to our picture-in-picture layout for Skype, and there we go. So you should be able to see us now on one side of the screen, and on the other side of the screen, we've got kind of a diagram I've created in Photoshop here, just to sort of show the setup. So why don't we go ahead and show, first of all, our standard setup here in the Epiphan studio. So you see you have me there, I'm hosting, looking awesome as usual, and my audio comes into the camera through a mixing board, just through XLR connections, and then you see here we've got an HDMI connection from the camera into Pearl 2. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what exactly Pearl 2 is doing, George.
Yeah, so Pearl 2 is taking that camera feed. Sometimes we have multiple camera feeds or other devices, like in your case, you're showing your computer, all of that coming into Pearl 2. We then create all those different layouts to do the live switching that we do during the show, our banners, graphics, and everything else. All of that is being done on Pearl. Pearl then does all of the encoding, compression, packaging that all up, and pushing the live stream out to both Facebook Live and YouTube Live simultaneously from one box. We then have our production staff there, Lisa primarily, who's doing all that switching, monitoring the audio on the mixer to make sure the levels are all balanced, and she's just doing that switching. So it means that, ideally you could run a two-person show, and really in a pinch you could do it as one person if you had to run everything. And that's really, the advantage of using something like Pearl is that as a hardware device that could be remotely managed, if I was on the same network as you, I could actually log into that Pearl and do the switching from here, from a remote location. So using a hardware appliance like Pearl gives you a lot of flexibility on how you can run the live stream.
Excellent. And you see the laptop here in this diagram is actually just the laptop that I have here on the desk in front of me, which makes it really easy if I want to show visuals, which is how I'm showing this this Photoshop screen that I have right here. But why don't we go ahead and show how, so this is our standard setup without the Skype call, but why don't we go ahead and I'm just going to turn on this other layer and I'll show people how we're doing the Skype call. So quite simply, what we're doing is I'm running the Skype call right here on the laptop. So I can see you. Really, I'll kind of show you behind the curtain, but this is just my desktop. So if I minimize my my Photoshop, you can see my desktop running. We can see that I've got the Skype call up here in one corner. But then my picture here, this is actually done in Pearl, this part of the layout. So I've got a green screen behind me, and we're putting a mat behind to make it look like we've got a big studio back here. But really, the setup is actually pretty simple. So I'm going to go ahead and bring my Photoshop back up. So you see, just running Skype on the laptop. I can make George full screen as well. If we just go like this, creates another sort of picture-in-picture layout. I can also, I can hear George, and that's why, if you see here, we've got a headphone splitter coming out of the laptop. Now, one half of that headphone splitter is going into a set of earbuds, which I'm wearing, so that I can hear George on the call. And then the other side of the headphone splitter is going to the mixer. So George, why is it important that we split off those headphones? Why wouldn't we just play the audio through the laptop speaker here on the desk?
So where you're located, you have that, we've mentioned it several times in previous episodes, you have an open shotgun mic over top of your desk.
Yeah, so you can't see it in the shot, but it's above me right here.
Exactly. If you were playing my audio through the speakers on your computer, not only would it mean we couldn't split them out to the mixer board where we need to blend it with your microphone, but also for monitoring it, you would get a lot of crosstalk and just background noise that we don't want to pick up. So using the earbud for monitoring is a pretty standard practice in pretty much any type of production. And so I'm doing it as well, so I can hear Dan on my computer that's running Skype and doing the video call to Dan. So it makes it very easy that way to monitor what's happening, as well as making sure it's isolated. That's the big key.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I can hear you crystal clear. I hope our viewers can too. And in fact, I've got viewers can't see this, but I've got a big monitor right above the camera where I can see what's happening on the live stream. I can see you right in front of me. So it's nice that I can still have that interaction with you, which is what the monitor helps with. So that's another aspect that wasn't in the diagram, but being able to see, I can see you here on the laptop as well, actually, but I can also see you behind the camera, which helps me to keep my eye line correct. But maybe we could talk a bit about your end of the Skype call. What's happening over there?
So obviously I have my laptop that I'm running Skype on, and I'm doing the video call with you. But how am I getting basically a good camera shot into Skype?
I gotta say, your camera looks really good. I mean, I can see the windows behind you. I can see cars driving by on the road. Your audio sounding good. The picture quality looks excellent. It doesn't look like I'm looking at you through a webcam. So how am I seeing you so well?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, just by my eye line, which you mentioned, clearly I'm not using the webcam built into my laptop. And there's a lot of reasons, and we've talked about that on previous shows as well, that webcams built into laptops generally are low quality in terms of image. They don't have a lot of flexibility. They're built into the screen, so the angle of the screen kind of gives you a weird perspective that's not ideal.
Yeah, it's like you're looking up underneath their chin.
Exactly.
The other thing is, like you're sitting in, sorry to interrupt, George, but you're sitting in front of a window that's pretty bright. Looks like it's pretty bright day outside there. With a webcam, I mean, anytime I've tried to use a webcam with a window behind me, I turn into a silhouette. So
yeah, it would get washed out pretty fast. So what we're doing here is I'm using the magic of Epiphan's AVIO. So what I'm doing is using a pretty standard camera. In this case, I'm actually using a Canon G20, one of these guys. But I could be using something like a DSLR, essentially anything that has an HDMI output on it that's going to give me good image quality. I run that into a capture device, AVIO in this case, and then USB into my laptop. The beauty of something like AVIO is that this shows up exactly like a webcam does. So in my Skype settings, I select this as my camera, and whatever I'm shooting on these higher image quality sources becomes my webcam in Skype. And so you get the results that you have.
Excellent. And I gotta say, I can hear you pretty well. I'm assuming that your audio is not coming through the camera's microphone, is it?
No, and that's the other thing is, again, microphones that are built into laptops are generally pretty poor. They're meant to try and pick up a lot of stuff, so background noise and things like that. So what I'm using is a wireless lav mic on my shirt, and I have that connected to my laptop. Now, in my particular case, I'm using a fairly high-end M-Audio box, a USB box going into my laptop. You don't always have to go to that extreme. There's definitely ways to do it through the line in on a laptop in some cases. The nice part about this is that I'm using a professional lav mic, the base connected to that M-Audio, which means I can fine tune my gain if I need to. I can do other manipulations. I could even have more microphones running into that box if I needed to. So if I had another person here with me, if they were also mic'd, I could be doing my own audio mixing on this end instead of relying on that happening somewhere else or having a single open mic. There's a number of ways that would give you the freedom. The nice part is that, again, I have a wireless lav mic. If I had I'm by myself in this space, but if I had other people with me, I could actually be moving around, right? And that's one of the nice parts about doing it this way is if I have a wider camera shot and a wireless mic, I would have the freedom to move around my set. And that's something that if you were just trying to use a laptop built-in camera and microphone, you wouldn't have that freedom.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like the setup is very flexible for you to, you're seated at a desk, obviously, but there's no reason why you couldn't be moving around or doing a presentation or, interacting with other people on your set as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And at the end of the day, I'm just using Skype, something that everyone's familiar with and is straightforward and simple to use and free for the basics, right? So for this setup, in terms of how I'm linking to you through Skype, other than having cameras, which I probably would have anyways, it's really a very low cost solution to bring in a high quality Skype shot.
Yeah, I mean, low cost. Skype is free, so I mean that's certainly great. And the other thing that I'm noticing is that there seems to be no discernible latency between either of us as well. Why is that?
Well, it's partly the way we've set things up, just making sure that everything ties together before we go into our encoder. I've seen some people try to have different encoders linking into a central point restreaming. There's some complicated ways to do it that sometimes actually makes it worse because of synchronization. Because everything's running into my laptop here into Skype, my end is synchronized. Coming out your side, we're running everything into the audio mixer, and then from there into your camera and then back out. So it makes sure that basically through every step of our chain, everything is synchronized to the final point of going into Pearl, and then we're good to go. Now, if we did have some synchronization issues there, Pearl has adjustments to fine-tune audio sync if we needed to. But there's a lot of different options, but the key is, again, sort of said in the beginning, looking at it logically and making sure that you're taking the simplest path to ensure that sync is maintained.
Very cool. And why don't we, I think this would be a good time. We've covered quite a bit of ground here. I'm sure people may have some questions. So if you have any questions about the Skype setup or how you could create a similar setup for yourself, certainly put them in chat. And we are monitoring chat. Don't be shy. Send us your questions. We'd love to answer any questions you may have, or if you have any comments as well.
I did actually get one question, Dan. And it wasn't really a question. It was more of a comment. Someone mentioned that my microphone had been distorting a little bit. That was earlier on. I actually just reached over when I saw that and made a very minor adjustment to the input gain on my microphone on the M audio box that should have helped, and hopefully it did. But that's a prime example of why using a device like that can help, is that it's super easy for me to just tweak a knob ever so slightly to improve that. Whereas if I was relying on a fixed built-in microphone on my laptop, I'd have no chance of fine-tuning that.
Okay, yeah, that's a great tip. Certainly, it's nice to have physical dials to adjust your audio when you're trying to do it on a laptop or on a mouse. It can be complicated trying to have too many things going on a laptop that you're using for the stream. So it's nice definitely nice to have some physical controls for certainly your volume and audio leveling. If there's any other questions, please, of course, let us know. We'll ask you a little question here, George. On your lower third, it says that you're in a top secret location. So maybe you could tell us why you're in a top secret location and what exactly is happening over there.
Yeah, so I'm in a top secret location away from the normal Epiphan studio bunker where Dan is, because we're working on setting up a new studio space. It's much larger, and we're going to be throwing in some new little tips and tricks and various different pieces that we're going to use not only for shows in the future, but also for our own internal film projects that we are putting together with our staff. So right now, it's still in the build-up process, but that's one of the reasons why I'm here, is working on fine-tuning some of those things, figuring out lighting, what's going to impact with these windows behind me, the desk, which is this nice new wooden-topped desk, which feels really awesome, actually. I kind of wish I had one back in the studio where you are, where I normally spend a lot of my time. So, yeah, we're working on that. There's going to be a lot more information coming soon about that, and hopefully someday soon we'll be hosting the show from this new location where we'll be able to do a lot more stuff.
Well, certainly one of the things that we want to do for the audience, for you guys watching, is bring you more of the content that's useful to you guys. So if you do have suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover, or tests you'd like us to run, or if you'd like us to try some different setups with our Epiphan equipment, certainly that's what the show's all about, and that's what we're here for. So having the second studio that George is in right now is going to give us the ability to bring you more of that content, more how-to videos, more tutorial type content. So certainly let us know what you want, and we'll do our best to bring it to you. George, why don't I'll just ask you now, do we have any news coming up in the near future?
We do, but just before I get to that, I just saw a question here coming in. Someone joined us a little bit late. They've seen some tutorials. They use virtual webcams to send a remote guest as a program feed into things. How does our system support that? That's quite a bit of a different scenario. Virtual webcams, things like XSplit and Wirecast, they use those types of systems to bring in virtual webcams as a shot within those software. Our system's working with physical signals. So with Pearl, we're capturing an actual HDMI signal. The advantage is that that HDMI signal could be anything. So on Dan's side, you just have the HDMI signal coming out of your laptop into Pearl. On my side, I'm capturing a high quality camera using HDMI through our AVIO device into Skype. And then just with some simple tricks in Pearl, we can crop out some of the extra to give our side-by-side shot with titling and stuff like that, to sort of bring those together. And then Pearl, as we mentioned earlier, does all the encoding and streaming from there.
Yeah, I gotta say.
I hope that answers the question, but if there's follow-up.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna mention, one of the cool things about Pearl is the ability to create really these customized layouts. So, we just created this very, very quickly. Lisa, one of our designers here at Epiphan, created this nice background that you see. Well, we've got obviously the green screen background behind me, so that we're doing a chroma key, but we're also able to create this nice frame as well for the side-by-side and the name layers over top. So by using those layers and cropping different parts of the image, we really have a pretty cool ability to set up the frame however we want. I mean, we could bring in a third collar and have a third frame, or do more interesting side-by-sides. Really, your imagination's the limit. It works. The layout designer works a lot like layers would in Photoshop.
Yeah, I mean, even just the cropping ability, even if either one of us had a second person next to them for this part, you could do a wider camera shot, but if you wanted to only focus on one person at a time, you could use cropping in those layouts to do that. So there's a lot of flexibility in those tools.
Very cool. So George, why don't you fill us in? I know there's some industry news coming up with Epiphan. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what's happening.
Yeah, so I guess the first piece is coming up very shortly. We will be attending, but not exhibiting, at IBC Europe, which is in Amsterdam. The dates on that are September 14th to 19th that we'll be there. A couple of our team members, David Kirk and Anthony Tironi, part of our team in marketing and sales, will be there meeting with partners and customers. And so if you're interested in meeting up with them to discuss any projects that Epiphan can help you with, send us an email and we can set something up for you. IBC is always a very interesting show. There's lots going on there. Yeah, it should be interesting. What else do we have?
Well, we do have another show coming up next week here live at Epiphan. So next week at 3 p.m., make sure to tune in because we've got a very interesting topic. We're going to be talking actually about 4K. And, 4K, it's obviously becoming more and more pervasive. More and more people have 4K viewing capability with their monitors, coming down in price a lot. I mean, I can watch YouTube on my big screen TV. There's an app built right in. And I've been streaming a lot of YouTube 4K content. And I've been quite impressed by the quality that YouTube is actually able to push out through my big screen TV, which is awesome. So next week, we're going to be talking about how to create your own 4K live stream, which is a very interesting topic. We can actually do it with Pearl 2, which is the system we're using to run this show right now. So if that's interesting to you, there's a lot of reasons why 4K is cool, not only for the higher resolution and quality, but also being able to crop out 4K frame, 1080p frames from within a 4K shot. There's a lot of possibilities of how to use 4K for your production. So stay with us for next week at 3 o'clock on this show, and we'll jump into that topic.
Yeah. So we did get a follow-up to that question earlier, and I just wanted to cover that for this viewer. Their follow-up was, do participants ever see the the complete program. For example, if Dan, you were sharing a PowerPoint that I needed to speak to, you could do that in Skype in the background. Dan could be doing an application or desktop share in Skype that I would be seeing on my laptop, and that could be isolated from what I'm doing in my camera, and vice versa. So there are ways of doing that. Depends on what you need to set up. Today, in our case, we're not doing that because I knew ahead of time any of that type of content that Dan was going to be sharing, and I didn't need to speak to it. But if that was the case, there are ways of doing that, again, just leveraging some of the built-in pieces to Skype. So I hope that answered that part of the question as well. But I think for today, that'll do it. So thank you for joining us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and all those things. Send us any suggestions or questions that you might have. live@epiphan.com is the email address. As Dan mentioned, next week we've got this really interesting 4K stuff coming up. So that'll do it for us. I'm George.
And I'm Dan.
See you next week.
So long.